The Aware Project's aim is to balance the public conversation about psychedelics, spread accurate information, and give a new face to psychedelia. We feel that this change will occur through connection and relationship, one individual at a time. We are calling on everyone whose lives have been improved through the mindful use of psychedelics to educate themselves and become ambassadors for the psychedelic experience. Show those around you that people who use psychedelics mindfully cross all social, racial, economic, and political boundaries.
All right. So I am going to introduce Tony and Shireen. They're going to start us off with a little bit of music to help us all settle into the space, and then we'll begin with our panel. So have them come up now. Give them a hand, you guys.
Well, we love the Aware Project, and I love Sita. So, literally, we're so appreciative of the work that Aware Project is doing. This so-called psychedelic renaissance that we're in, it's exciting on one hand to see the psychedelics and plant medicine starting to find their kind of proper place in our culture. And at the same time, it's kind of the wild, wild west, And with the newfound popularity and the acceptance of these substances as medicine, also comes with it a lot of shenanigans that we're all aware of that is challenging for people that have been advocating the positive benefits for so long, So on one hand, we're always kind of like, this is great. On the other hand, it's like, oh my gosh, like the genie's out of the bottle kind of thing. So that's the importance of projects like Aware Project, and the conferences and work that people like Sita are doing, just to constantly, as this exponential popularity is happening, that we're also, becoming more educated, And the good news is, I got to say, over the last few years, I've met so many incredible young people that have told me that they recently had their first psychedelic or plant entheogenic experience, and they knew everything they needed to know. Like, I had a sitter, it was like set and setting, and they articulated their experience from like such a mature place that I definitely didn't my first time. So that said, I guess it's working. So one of my passions is medicine music, particularly the fusion of traditional medicine music with what we're now calling contemporary medicine music. And the contemporary medicine music is rising out of what's now being kind of universally called neo-shamanism, right? And early on when I heard that term, it had some negative connotations for me, but I realized it's actually exactly what it is. It's actually a new contemporary really evolution of shamanism that is more appropriate for Western people and Western consciousness. So we're just going to share with you a little fusion of the kind of music that we've been developing over the last few years or so. We travel far to find this place where weary souls find a warm embrace. We travel far to find this place singles, all ancestors, yes. All luminary, yes. All white tyrant, yes. Banyan, and the medicine now, yes. I'm calling, yes. And opening, yes. And that's a name, May the grace of God always be with you, shining from within, and bring new joy to every soul that is alive. May the love we're sharing spread its wings and fly across the world, and bring new joy to every soul that is alive. And may all the beings in all the worlds be happy. May all the beings in all the worlds be free. May all the beings in all the worlds be happy. May all the beings in all the worlds be free. We just got back from doing 5 shows in Thailand, so I'm giving you what's left of this voice. This particular topic is something I'm really close to and see tonight others have talked a lot about, and it is idea of shadow work. You know, interesting thing is it often is spoken of as if it's something separate from the ceremony work, particularly with any plant medicine, but ayahuasca. When in reality, it's at the core of that work, right? You're not going to do ayahuasca work or any kind of plant fusion work and not be dealing with the shadow. That's where the healing is coming from. And it's not talked about often enough. It is generally the most common issue that challenges the integration process, right? It's how to be with what comes up. And as he was mentioning before we started, that certainly includes and is a part of the collective shadow. So when she asked me to be here, I'm like, absolutely, and this is a topic we want to be in an ongoing conversation about. So that, thank you, and thank you all.
Thank you guys so much for sharing. It's such a beautiful way to start this work, is to start this these events, is to be able to drop into our hearts and just remember, you know, why are we so passionate about this stuff? Why are we doing this work? Is to share love, you know, and to create more love in the world. And something that I've been thinking a lot about recently is how once we heal ourselves enough, how do we start to heal people around us, to heal the world around us? What kinds of action steps? What takes you from that step of healing self to then moving forward into action? And it's something that deeply interests me. So with that, I'm really excited to have this beautiful panel that's going to be coming up. And it's going to be led by Marisa, who has been curating our events and has been doing an amazing job of it. So I'm going to read her bio. She's going to be our moderator. And we'll get started. So Marisa Starts is an LA-based filmmaker, director, and of the documentary series The Healing Powers, and is a Kriya-certified Kundalini yoga teacher who spent most of her life unraveling the impact of emotional experiences on the psyche. Her quest has taken her around the world, giving talks at festivals and filming the stories of healing with shamans in Peru to holy men in India. She programs speakers and events at the Aware Project and has screened her work at numerous conferences internationally. Her films have been featured by Gaia, Viceland, NBC Universal, 60 Second Docs, AFC, Spin, Participant Media, and at film festivals around the world. Please welcome Marisa.
Hey, hi everyone. Thank you for the amazing music, guys. That was the most, heartfelt thing it made me emotional. All right, so I guess I'll start with my little spiel before I introduce our panelists. So the panel today is called Revealing the Shadow, Healing the Unseen, which isn't exactly what you would expect to dive into at a psychedelic salon necessarily, except that psychedelics, for those of you that are new, are such excellent tools for diving into the psyche, for getting out of your own head and getting that sort of third-person perspective and being able to see those things like your shadow that you normally can't see in your everyday life. Terence McKenna called it removing the social conditioning that we've been trained to see the world with, the programs that our parents instilled in us, that we've been operating under, that you just can't see normally. Let's see. So we've got some Carl. This is the idea of the shadow work started with Carl Jung. So he stated the shadow to be the unknown dark side of the personality, but what does that mean? That we have some malicious aspect of ourselves? Not exactly. According to Jung, the shadow, usually instinctive and irrational, is known for projecting our own perceived personal inferiority and recognizing those same traits as perceived moral deficiency in someone else. So, in layman's terms, the part of your loved ones that drives you absolutely bananas, that's your shadow. That's your shadow. And the idea, it's confusing because for me, anger, other people's angers was the thing that would make me crazy. So them lashing out and having rage, that was the thing I hated most in my loved ones. And I was always like, that can't be my shadow because I don't do that. You know what it ends up doing is you push it down. It doesn't always necessarily manifest in that way, or eventually it might, but it has other side effects. And our panelists have been working with people, helping them sort this out for decades, and they're really going to tell you about it much more than I am. But one thing I would like to do, this year has been all about community, and when we try to tackle these issues by ourselves, it gets hard and heavy. And oftentimes you think, okay, I need to go into this dark place by myself and deal with this thing I'm ashamed of. And really, we all have it, so why don't we do it together and make it kind of fun and celebrate the journey? So I'm going to actually ask you guys to turn to someone you don't know, introduce yourself, and explain what you think the shadow is and maybe how you manifest it. I'm gonna put a timer on. If that's too intimate, talk about what brought you here today. But I encourage you, share, be open, be vulnerable. We create community with it. So the timer's on. Go ahead and look around and begin. I'll give you a 10-second warning to flip.
I've had the pleasure of working with a couple of these ladies, and I can't tell you how delightful they are. It's really fun to see them together. They haven't met each other before tonight, so it's pretty awesome.
Is this on?
Sita Ramaya. Sita has traveled and worked extensively in the Amazon for the past 17 years. She's a spiritual herbalist, Pusangera, did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. And plant wisdom practitioner formerly trained in the Shipibo ayahuasca tradition. She's the founder of Plant Teachers, dedicated to cultivating entheogenic awareness, and producer of the Visionary Convergence Conference. She stewards a 70-acre land conservation project in the Peruvian Amazon, and lectures, teaches, and works with individuals and groups in ceremonies and guides plant dietas. She is a somatic experiencing practitioner and currently trains, teaches, and practices to heal personal, institutional, and cultural trauma. She's an art curator and is organizing and curating ayahuasca and visionary art, a coming together of cultures at the Art Space and show at Ayahuasca 2019 in Girona, Spain. So there's a World Ayahuasca Conference that you should talk to her about later on. So visit Plant Teachers if you want to know more of this magic. All right, Helaine Z. Harris, LMFT, is a multi-sensory intuitive shamanic healer, psychotherapist, and spiritual business coach, as well as author, who empowers clients to manifest their greatest potential. She's trained for over 30 years in shamanism and incorporates her work at an awakening center. She works in the Valley. She's wonderful. Dr. Marie Mbouni, did I say that right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Marie is an MD Anesthesiologist and a mystic, shamanic, and energy healer, spiritual guide, author, facilitator of sacred ceremonies and retreats, creativity coach, and world traveler. Marie is the author of Reclaim Your Gifts and the co-author of the new Feminine Evolutionary. I have not had the pleasure of working with you, and I do look forward to that day. All right, so we're going to dive in here. All right, so to you ladies here, to the women here, tell us about the modality you prefer to use with clients when addressing shadow work. What does working with the shadow look like in that modality? And from your experience, which psychedelics are most useful in working with this? Obviously, you don't have to answer all three, whatever comes up to you. Not all at once. I think you really have to bring up the mics to your mouths, too, so keep that in mind. Who'd like to go first? Marie?
No, I was just checking my mic.
No, the mic's there. You might as well talk.
No, it's not.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't. Oh, this one.
Is it on?
It's just really sensitive. I think we might have to use.
Why don't we use this one?
Hello.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
The wired ones. Sorry.
Oh, me? Okay. So, the shadow, what is it?
What is it? How do you like to work with it? What's your modality?
I'm experienced and trained in many modalities. And in working with the shadow, first people have to understand what it is.
Bring it louder, closer to you.
Can you hear better now? Yeah. Yay! If I remember to keep it here, it'll be a miracle. I tend to move. It's first about getting people to understand what the shadow is and creating scenarios and visualization. Sometimes I use hypnosis. I'll use what's called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I'll definitely use hypnosis, emotional freedom technique, and then there are sessions, journey work. Once they have an idea what they're looking for and how it might project outward and how the slips of the tongues they let out. Oh, when you accidentally say something, it's your shadow. And it's really what you mean. And people get confused. They think it's dark or evil. It's just what we're afraid of. It's where shame is hidden. It's where trauma is hidden. And when we've been violated in different ways from the conditioning we've gone through, then we create defense mechanisms. And we don't even know we're doing it. So it's finding any kind of way of going into a person's energy system, energy structure, where they're hiding the deeper part of themselves. And it's a gift to really bring it out. Because for me, when I worked with one part of my shadow, I've had many parts of shadow work, what I got to was a much greater level of love. And I found it so amazing that connected to this hideous part of me that I wanted to hide, my vulnerability in my case, was this tremendous love. And I can talk more, but I know you ladies have great things to say too.
Should I get this one?
Yeah, I guess if that's the one that's working, huh? Okay. Here, you want to give me the other ones? Want to give me yours is working?
When I turned it on, it just made that noise.
Microphone dilemma.
Yeah. So I really love what you said, Helaine. The thing about the shadow that has everybody afraid is because the word shadow. It just feels like dark alley, monster under the bed, and I think the important thing to understand is that it's because it's something that's subtle. You don't see it. It's hidden. So it's not about bad, good, wrong, right. It's something that everybody has. And I really loved your story about what we can gain when we work with the shadow. It reminds me of that Rumi quote that everybody knows: what you seek is seeking you. Or what you seek is inside of you, right? And so how do I like to work with the shadow? I think the first part is usually getting people to understand that it is nothing wrong, and really getting them in a relaxed, open-hearted space where they can start accepting that it is okay. Because what happens is that we get into resistance when we think it's something bad, right? And what I've noticed is that it's those places of us that we don't like, that we judge, that we hide, that we are ashamed of. And when we agree with ourselves that, wow, I did that. I remember when I first was working on judgment on myself. Of course, who wants to think they judge, right? And when I started working on myself on that, I realized how I judged everything. In a, what I call good way, but still it was. And Helaine talked about the energy. The thing is, when we do not accept or do not recognize or avoid places of ourselves, we use so much energy to repress that. And the gift that you hear every shaman talking about when they say there's so much gift, so much power that comes from healing the shadow is because you now free all that energy you were using to repress, to oppress, to suppress, to pretend, to look like. So that's usually a really beautiful thing to see when realization comes through. So that's the first part, really coaching in a loving way. I use love as medicine and really help people start to love and accept themselves so that they can stop judging. How about you, Sita?
Well, thank you, Helaine, and thank you, Marie, very much. And before I answer or join in the conversation, I should say, I want to thank personally Tony and Shireen, and to reiterate this message, this underpinning of love, right? And we've all talked about it here, that and that really speaks to, for me, how I hope and intend to work, and that is whatever modality I use, that I do it from a place of love and a place of service, and gently and bit by bit. The shadow isn't something like, oh, here's this deep dark hole, let me just pull the entire lid off of it. It can be too much, right? And so sometimes we just say like, oh, there's a deep dark hole and there's a lid on it. Like maybe that's all that happens, is just recognizing there's a lid. And then maybe we push it aside just a little bit. And the beauty of it is, once we let a little light in, it's no longer in the shadow. So there's a bit of an oxymoronic process, right? So we're working with the shadow, the things that we can't see because it's in the darkness, but then the minute we see it, it's no longer in the darkness, and that in itself is so beautiful and so healing. And so, as Marie mentioned about doing a lot of groundwork and foundational work, so my primary, I'm going to say non-ceremonial modality, although I really aspire to live in the ceremony of life. So my friends in medicine and family can check me on that and let me know how I'm doing. But my primary modality that I work with these days is somatic experiencing. And for me, it's the body is a very rich repository of wisdom and experience. It has been present for all of our experiences from the moment of conception. And so it has this memory, this wisdom, and it has a nervous system. And so for me, it's a really powerful access point, because we don't have to eliminate the body or our nervous system or the physiology in order to have a mystical experience, a spiritual experience, or an evolution or emanation into a state of loving allowance for ourselves. And so knowing that we have a nervous system that's reacting a certain way, perhaps to the shadow, protecting ourselves based on the development of our nervous system, can give us a little bit of space to be able to not confuse who we truly are with our nervous system, with these patterned responses that have come from our experiences or from culture or from our parents or from our schools. So for me, to answer the question, the shadow is the unseen. I think that you've all done a lovely job of describing it. And I think that you all, maybe even if you haven't thought about it, know, oh, that's it. It's that, oh, like, I wish, like when somebody says, like, what's your most embarrassing moment? Like, and you think about that, and like, why is it so embarrassing and so shameful? What's the thing you've never told anybody? That's the shadow. And the pain of that, and what we sometimes experience as the burden of that. So, yeah, I think that's all I have to say at the moment. Thank you.
Yay! Hang on to the mic for a sec. Yeah, we do have two functioning microphones. So, yeah, thank you, ladies. That was wonderful. Yeah, I just want to include, as we've already touched on somatic, but obviously, this being the psychedelics, we're going to focus on that. But somatic body work, breath work, meditation, traditional psychotherapy, EMDR, TRE, all these wonderful modalities are all really great tools, and I know that we all work in combinations of these, so just keep that in mind. This psychedelics aren't for everyone, and they're all wonderful tools. So what I would love to hear from you guys is one particularly potent example, either in your own experience or perhaps with a client, where somebody was completely unaware of their shadow and it reared its head and you were able to help them understand it in whichever way. So.
So I'm going to go, and I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn, if that's okay, and speak about the collective shadow that Tony touched on. And so in ceremonial work, in shamanic work, and in how the shamanic lineages have migrated to the north from South America, which is my primary experience coming out of Peru. Somebody said shenanigans. We call them shamanigans. And they can be pretty dark. I mean, we hear stories of sexual abuse. We hear stories of abuses of power. Like, that's the shadow. Because it's not just, sex or violating, a physical boundary. It could be around money or a belief system or an emotional attack. And so I just want to call this out. And in my own personal experience, many, 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 many years ago, in 2008, I had received information about something that had happened with someone I was studying with about him sexually abusing a participant. And I flew to Peru and I confronted him. And he said, yes, this is true. And the whole family came and they said, we're trying to heal this. And actually, I was a bit, I would say bamboozled, but I was also very naive and not able to see my own shadow, which was I wanted to believe, right? I didn't want to not believe that this healing was taking place. And so about another 6 or 7 months went on, and I realized, after doing like a little bit of investigation about hearing another report of abuse, that this was a pattern that had been going on for a very, very long time. And so then I made a choice to leave this teacher. And in that, I really faced my own shadow, because pretty much nobody stood with me. And at the time, it was a community of predominantly men. And so it was, and the love that came through and the learning that came through for me. So without a physical form human teacher at that time, I then had the plants. I ultimately cultivated other teachers and other ways over time, but the part of my shadow was that, wow, I wanted to believe him, and I wanted to believe the story so much because it was devastating to me. And also I had to look at, that's who I chose. Like, and what does that mean, right? Like, why did I choose this person? And then retrospectively saying, oh, there were signs. There were signs, and there were things that I was in denial about myself. And I can say that over the years, profound healing has come out, not just for me, but for other people who ultimately, over time, in their time and in their capacity and their awareness, have also left this community. And for me, I can honestly say, like, I love you. I give you love for your healing and your transformation. And I'm over here. And I'm going to be over here in a place where I know I'm doing the best to be in my integrity and in my light, and being in service in a good way. So that's my shadow story.
Wow, incredible. I love that you really chose to take your power and really set your boundaries without judgment and just accepting. That's incredible. I think I'm gonna tell a story about one of my shadows. I give myself a lot of shamanic journeys, and I was working on the shadow, and so I'm gonna bypass the process. And the end of the process was for me to shape-shift and be in a place where maybe an animal, an element, something would show me my shadow. And so I saw this gazelle, elegant, running fast, beautiful. And I was like, oh, this is so great. I don't have a shadow, yay. And then, I don't even know why we do that, right? But there's a little part of it that's like, oh, phew. And then the gazelle turned, and I saw her eyes. And her eyes were huge, lost, and it looked like she had been running for a long time and she was just tired. And so, and then I looked at the ground when she was running and it was cracked, dry land. So I went from, look how perfect she is, perfect, to, oh, it's actually not perfect. She's suffering. And as I started communicating with the gazelle, it was like my whole interior, my inner space is as dry as that. And I had been looking for love coming from a place of, my mother wasn't there, so it was like I looked for love, but it was like me, love me. And by not loving me, that's how dry and lost and tired and just done. That's how I was. So that's so much information, and I started my healing process, and that's how I unleashed the potential to love. It's like my capacity to love is just, but it started there, the willingness to see that I was that. So it's it can be intense. It can be intense. So that's my story. One shadow.
I'm going to share a brief one about a client which I was part of a whole group helping to do a deep healing. And that is someone in the group who had molested his daughter when she was a teenager. And it was very interesting for me because I have worked a great deal with incest and sexual abuse and all kinds of things. And what he kept saying was he thought he was helping her learn how to be a woman. That was his perspective for quite a while. And it took him quite a bit to go in on a much deeper level and recognize how abusive it was for her, and then get to the sexual abuse he went through earlier in life, and the patterning of it, and the damage it does, and how abuse begets abuse, whether it's physical, sexual, or emotional. And it taught me a great deal about compassion for both sides, for the victim and perpetrator. And that was hard for me. And I had to look at that and deal with that in me. But one shadow time that I went through was I had someone in my office. I have a couple of people sometimes helping, or one person helping in my office. And what I found out is that for a number of years, she was working extra hours and I didn't know it, and she was using when she shopped for me and taking the money that way. And it came to about $30,000. And I was pretty pissed, okay? It's like, ah! And then I had to look at how I wasn't checking things enough. How a friend said, Helaine, you do body work. You do somatic work. How could you miss that? It was in her body, duh. So I had to look at where I didn't check things enough. And then when I had to work, and it took me a whole year of shadow work, it was not fun, was looking at deception, my own deception, because here I'm such a nice person, well, some of the time. But what I got to look at is my deception was what appears nice. It's in being the pleaser. It's in not wanting other people to be annoyed or angry at me. It's afraid of rejection. So, yes, I'll go with you to that event when I really didn't want to, and last minute I find an excuse kind of thing. Where I was deceptive, and I know many people who've been pleasers and still are, it's part of the patterning. Because you're so afraid to be totally honest because of what might happen, the consequences. And so in looking at the shadow, it's also looking at how did it form? What was your history? my history was with a borderline mother. Well, if you don't please, you're really going to have a lot of fights every day. And even then, I didn't always please. With physical abuse, people leave their body. With emotional abuse, they go to the head. Or at least if it's safe enough, they do that. But it was so profound for me to look at what I never saw about me, my own deception. And it's helped me so much because I work with so many people like that. Okay.
Thank you. Wow. Wow. Thank you guys all. So much of understanding the shadow is by hearing everybody's examples. So we're just going to dive into a few more of those. I've been doing self-work for the last 20 years and trying to understand why I'm not productive why I'm not successful in my life the way I want to be, and why my relationships aren't the way I want to be. And just a couple of days ago in the conversations, putting this panel together, it was reflected, okay, what is the thing I hate in others? There was a tendency towards abuse and anger. And how did I express that? I abused myself. And I also kept people far away from me, and it's only when they get really close, then suddenly it'll show up. And it's really ugly. So, I think I've kept people really far away from that. So it's just such this insidious thing that you can't see clearly, because I wouldn't give myself opportunities to get angry. And when I did, it was road rage. And I was like, it's totally cool to yell in my car at everybody else because they can't hear me. That's fine. That's acceptable. And I'm releasing my anger, right? I'm not pushing it down. No, So that being said, I'd love to hear, you just gave a wonderful handful, but if you guys have any other examples of how people have pressed that shadow down and how it's shown up perhaps in different ways that aren't directly a reflection, that would be lovely to hear.
That's actually a great question, and I love everybody's example. There are many ways the shadow shows up, especially in 21st century LA, business, arts, whatever. And it might show up as maybe you start things and you never finish them. You have a lot of projects, you're passionate, and then after a little while, it's like, wait, I don't even remember what it was I was passionate about. And you stop and you start another one. That's huge. Another way, very subtle way it can show up is you actually don't allow yourself to be seen in very sexy ways. Like, it doesn't look like you're not allowing yourself to be seen, but you hide in plain sight. That is very, very, very common. And I know many people like that. I used to be one. I used to hide and not want to embrace my spiritual self. That was actually huge. I wanted to be normal and like everybody else, and a scientist. And what I wasn't realizing is that everybody but me knew that I was different, right? But I wanted to belong. So when you start going a little deeper, it's like, why was I hiding? I wanted to belong. So I thought, if I'm exactly like everybody else, then it'll be so much easier. Wrong.
Something that speaks to me personally and that I have witnessed and presenced in others is the sense of, it goes hand in hand with wanting to belong. There's not a place for me. So for me, I'm an adoptee, and so I come from an era when it was a shameful thing if a woman became pregnant out of wedlock or a teen and they were sent away, and relinquished their children. Oftentimes, literally at the moment of birth, the child was whisked away. And so coming into this world and carrying this belief that there isn't a place for me, and then being in an orphanage, and this sense that there's not a place for me, but then what happens is engaging in behaviors that keep me in that shadow. I was the child who didn't play well with others. And we see, I see people in community settings, in ceremonial settings, and in my therapeutic practice. They really want to know there's a place for me. There's a place where I can be held and where I can be loved and I can be welcomed. And as Marie pointed out, we're looking out there for that to happen. But until we're able to say, wow, I didn't get that. And now this actually is my comfort zone, weirdly enough, to be isolated. But what I want is the connection. So it gets all very confused, right? And so I can't tell you how many people who come to group work, and I'll look out at the group and, maybe there's 12 people and 10 people say, I always feel out of place, like I don't belong and there's not a place for me. And I'm like, wow, look, you're all here together though, right? So, yeah, exactly. And then we'll cultivate a persona, not intentionally, but it's a way of navigating, right? For me, a few years ago, I realized I actually have some social anxiety, like who to thunk it, right? Like I'm out giving presentations and teaching and doing all of this, but put me in a room where I actually have to engage one-on-one with people, different story. So these things that are seemingly contradictory are oftentimes the ways that our shadow is at play, right? Mm-hmm. And the good news is most of us cultivate resource and navigational tools, and then we come here and then we start talking about it, and then we know, oh right, there's something that I can do, and so I think I want to just punctuate this part of what I'm sharing with the hopeful part, right? So and the hopeful part is when I know for me that I can remember to always be learning, to as we were saying, for us not to be up here as some authorities, but oh right, thank you, Tony, everything being done with love. Thank you, Ash, and everybody here. Oh yeah, it's about the love. How do we cultivate love, and how do we cultivate this change and healing and transformation and transparency in ourselves so that we emanate it out to actually create a healing space for how we show up. I always say how do I talk to the person that I'm buying my groceries from? That's it, right? So that's what I have to say for now. Thank you.
I love other people who are sometimes invisible at certain times in life and have such wonderful gifts. I have a story to share about that. Many years ago, I was training my first intern as a psychotherapist. There are times I train interns coming up. And this was many years ago, I don't know, probably over 30 years ago or something like that. And I remember she said to me, Helaine, you were channeling in a workshop I did. And I got angry. No, I wasn't. Don't say that about me. I don't want to hear that. And as time went on, I realized my greatest gift is that I'm an empath, that I'm an intuitive, and that's what allows me to see inside people and get them quicker to where they need to go, because I can feel it, see it, sense it. And yet, that's what I was most ashamed of. I'm not a medium, I'm not a channel, and I didn't really know about it. And now I'm putting together a class on helping, empowerment for empaths and highly sensitive people. Because I finally realized, oh yeah, I really am that. And I get a lot of people coming to me for that. And many of you are. And I realize in a group like this, where there are, I'm going to say the word that first comes, weirdos like me, I'm comfortable. In other places, I have social anxiety. It's okay. But I at least now know to recognize it and say, oh, these really aren't my people, and I don't really fit in. And it's helped me when my assistant said, Helaine, you shouldn't just say only spiritual, whatever people you're going to work with. She said, you're cutting out half the people or more. And I said, but they're not my people. What works for me are people who want to grow and heal and feel better in life, and where it's been hard for them. And I love what you both said. In the way I've been trained, it's all about love. It's love that heals no matter what we're doing. Because that's how someone will feel safe enough to go into the shadow, to go into the trauma. One, if they know we're capable of dealing with it, but also if they feel our heart. So I love you guys, you're great.
Yay, we're gonna have a club after this. Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna come back to this point later on, but really the thing that we're most hating in ourselves, it seems like if we can dive into it, then actually I think one of you have told me this, inversely, it's a gift. I think it was you, Helaine. You said the percentage of that thing that we're pushing away and we don't like about ourselves, if we can dive into it and release it and accept it, there is a proportional amount of good stuff you get out of it. So if, it's anger, then on the other side is pleasure or joy or, some, it's not always a direct thing, and there's not a graph out there, but, you get the point. So, do you want to...
I kind of add to that, because that's a very important piece that I didn't finish what I was saying, or I didn't think of it until you said it, is that it's actually through the shadow work that the divine pieces come up of what our real gifts are. When you go into the darkness that you absolutely are terrified of, or you hate, or you can't stand, or no, I'm not a weirdo like that, but I really am, it's amazing what happens. And I've seen it over and over again. So I invite you to go on the glorious journey into your own soul to meet these pieces that will enrich your life forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And like I say, the way through it is through it. And do it with kindness, do it bit by bit, do it lovingly, do it gently, do it with a set and setting that really works for you. But really what is our deepest, darkest place can become our biggest, most profound, strongest gift. And we've heard like the wounded healer, right? So the extent and depth of what we heal becomes our medicine, and we all have medicine. And so when we're able to go to those places, like wow, if you've ever if you haven't done shadow work, but maybe you've run a marathon or you've done something that's really hard and you get through it and you're like wow, and we just feel stronger and more vibrant, and we have built some resilience. So to embrace even the capacity for considering going to those deep, dark places. And the thing is that we can't see the gems because they're in the darkness, right? But then we put the light in and it's like, oh, look, I just caught a little sparkle of something in there. Like, what is that? So, yeah.
So many gems. I want to talk about two things. Number one, when we talk about healing, the way I think about healing, it's about wholeness. It's about becoming whole. It's not about fixing. It's not about getting rid of. It's really important that we make that distinction. And the other thing, when we talk about the gift, putting the light, I just want to invite you to imagine a seed. And when a seed is underground in the soil, the seed can choose to look at the soil like a tomb, or it can choose to look at the soil, the deep, dark place, like a womb, where it's going to come out and grow and bloom, or whatever type of seed it is. And when we change that perspective, it is so much easier to be curious. That's really what I want to invite everybody. Curiosity, wonder, not trying to fix, really trying to discover. And I also wanted to talk about a shadow that a lot of people don't talk about, which is pleasure, joy.
Yes.
Because it's not just shame, anger, I actually talk about this a lot, like how long can you hold your joy? Joy is actually suspicious. And I've experienced it many times where people tell, oh, you always smile, you're always smiling, or oh, you know, blonde, or you know, you must be an idiot if you smile. Like, it's actually not okay. It's a collective shadow. And how many times do we feel like we have to tone it down or not smile too much, or it's a big shadow. So it's another thing you can look at. It's an easy shadow to start with, like, where do I hold myself back? Where do I not express my joy, my pleasure, ecstasy? Where do I do that? And why? That's a nice place to start.
That's so awesome. Both things, the seed and the joy. Love it.
It's so true.
All right, so thank you. That was amazing. The idea is we can address the shadow by accepting it as a natural part of ourselves. And in doing this, we're stepping away from the automatic judging part of ourselves that would usually condemn that behavior or that unwanted aspect as bad. Because as one theory has it, the shadow is neither good nor bad. A theory I'm a big fan of. So how do you help people understand this unwanted part of the self is actually best addressed when we accept it and integrate it? How do we accept this thing that we've judged as unwantable? And really, if I can insert one thought, that idea that we are whole is kind of hard. I remember finding that hard to grasp, that there's nothing wrong with any of us, right? And just to add a layer to that, we're perfect, and then we learn the social conditioning of our caregivers, our schools, our society, blah, 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 that tells us, oh, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not that. But that's just the social conditioning. You're great. And it's our understandings as we're growing up that, oh, you internalize those voices, and that's what makes you think you're broken. I just want to highlight that because there's been so many times that people have told me, you're whole, and I'm like, what do you mean? There's so many things wrong with me, and I couldn't wrap my brain around that one piece right there. So anyway, that being said, back to my question, which I already forgot what it was. Do you guys know what it was? How do you help people understand how to accept this part of themselves that they have considered wrong maybe their whole lives?
Well, I think I sort of addressed it. When they begin going into a shadow aspect, they also need to get to how that formed. How it just doesn't happen from nothing. It happens from conditioning. It happens from being hurt. Oh my God, they don't love me. I have to be what I'm not. It comes from a certain thing that happened, or an event, or past lives, or you brought it in from before sometimes. That's where we have to go. So in doing that, they eventually get to, oh, it was a response. It's like, I've worked with one client for a while, and she was taught that she's nothing, she's useless, she's stupid, she's this, that. And at some point she brought in some drawings she did in architecture school. And having taught long enough, I know what IQs look like in people. And I looked at her and said, well, you can't be stupid, you couldn't have drawn that. Your IQ has to be a minimum of 120 or 125. So whatever you were taught is wrong. And she still couldn't accept that. But over time, as she began looking into the level of abuse that she went through, and the only thing she could do to survive was leave her body, which meant she left it in school, so she wasn't learning, and she had ADHD at the time. So then there's an understanding. And what I help them with is compassion. Compassion for their little one. Compassion for the wounded infant. Compassion for their past life. and eventually maybe compassion for who hurt them. But that's later. So that's why I do it. Part of what I try. I love you guys.
Yes, thank you. So, the question is, how do we get people to do what?
To accept that part of themselves they don't like, that they hate.
So, well, one of the things that I'd like to touch on is this idea of healing not being something to fix, like something broken. And there's been a lot of talk about integration, inner space integration. I'm not going to get into that, but I feel like when we are orienting ourselves to having an experience of an integrated whole being, and whatever parts that we recognize, it's not like, well, I don't have this part, but whatever parts we do recognize, okay, let's invite them all to the table. And I think inviting them all to the table might be that part where there's that thing that I really don't like, but let's come, let's see, what it looks like, and the curiosity and the fascination. My primary spiritual advisor teaches that we can't be curious and fascinated and afraid at the same time, because we're like, what is it? Let me see. Let me get a closer look. Right? Like we're moving toward it. And so, curious and fascination is an awesome way to approach moving toward the shadow. The other, just a small technique, and it's something that we can all do. If there's something in ourselves that maybe we've done, and maybe it's just a crossword, or we just recognize this automatic response, and we have 3, 4, 5 people in our life that are calling us on the same thing over and over again, right? It's a clue. And if we were our own best friend, or somebody we love dearly, or a 5-year-old, what would we say to that person? Wow, you have so many beautiful parts about yourself. And this thing comes up, and it's really hard, and it must be really hard for you to have all that anger. And we love you, and we're going to be here with you, and we're going to work through it together. Right? So if we could say that to ourselves, like we would to our dearest, closest friend that we love, that's a step in the right direction. The actual way this unfolds depends person to person, situation to situation. But all of these things are things that we can think about as we're on our own journey of healing and transformation. And I really like this word, transformation, because this energy that Helaine talked about, and this gazelle can go from being like this to being back in that flow and doing this most lovely dance, and it's all the same energy. It's just being transformed and expressed in a different way. And so a lot of that is trusting ourselves enough to call in the support that we resonate with, and trusting that to help us become that beautiful dancing gazelle.
Thank you. Wow. So much wisdom, hey? I wanna talk about something different, which is when we think about the shadow, maybe we could think about it as a life code process, as something that we designed to survive, whatever. And I'm going to take my example. I kind of touch a little bit about how I actually met my mother when I was 3. And I remember she had married another person, and they were holding hands, and they were walking in front of me. And I remember at 3 years old asking myself, what does it take for my mother to hold my hand, right? So, no, I'm fine, no. Like, that actually is like a shadow. So, she knows. So my shadow was that I'm alone in the world. I have to make it happen. And that made me resourceful, independent, successful, like I'm an MD. And however, at some point, it cannot take you all the way. It cannot take you to your fullest potential. So when you realize that no matter how it comes, you did it because it was a code, for people who like computers. Like, you can call it that. I created this. So you don't have to fix it or hate it, or it's like, oh, this is what I use my anger to escape, right? Now I can choose to not escape if I don't want to, and then what is behind that anger? So there are so many ways you can actually play with this and not be afraid of it.
Yay, love that. I always thought of it as a puzzle that your soul chose for you to find out who you are. Because it's only through that obstacle. Like, I mean, if life was smooth sailing, it'd be kind of boring, yeah. And like, if you have an obstacle, it's almost like you're a knife. You get to sharpen yourself against a rock and learn who you truly are. So it's a gift. It's not always, it's a nasty gift, but it's a good gift. No, it's not a nasty. It's hard.
Later on, it's not nasty.
Yeah, in hindsight, it's lovely. Yeah.
So you touched on something, and I'm going to thank Ash for turning me on to Conversations with God.
Oh, that's a good one.
I don't know if anybody here has read this work, and I'm going to do a terrible job of like paraphrasing or telling the story wrong, but the idea being that there's two souls ready to incarnate, and the one says, well, what do you want to learn this time? And the one says, forgiveness, and the other one says, are you sure? Because like there's an agreement, right? Like, so if you want to learn forgiveness, there has to be something to forgive. So if we take that kind of long view of our soul, and again, my spiritual teacher teaches, like never in our soul's eternal journey have we ever been the victim, but always the creator. So we're creating these experiences, right? And we're creating these codes, and we can have a little bit of fun, dare I say, with it, right? And revel in the miraculousness of even just having a body and a consciousness, or a body that helps us be aware of our consciousness and our soul and this journey. So that doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt, and it doesn't mean that we don't feel lonely and we don't feel grief. But this is really the opportunity that we create so that we can have the full range of human experience and these emotions that are so powerful.
I read something that was like, the point of life is not to be happy, but to grow. To really fully experience all these things. And then this other little add-on is this conversation that happens between your soul and your whatever soul family. You say, I want to learn forgiveness, and your family mate is like, are you sure? Because I'm going to have to do all these horrible things to you in this life. And you shake hands, and that's what you do, And I mean, this is a nice way of stepping away from feeling like a victim in your life, and realizing this is a really vast opportunity that you do have the power to take on. You just have to see it that way. It's all about perspective, So, all right, we're getting kind of close towards the end. What time do we have to? 9:15 or so? Okay. Great. All right. So there's just a couple more questions to kind of tie it in, and we have a little Q&A, right? Yeah. So is there ever a time that we can say a person's really ready to face their shadow? Do we need a therapist or a guide, or what other steps can we talk about that can help people do it? Can they do it on their own?
How much time do we have left?
Well, like 10-ish minutes.
Only 10
10, 15-ish.
And that includes questions?
Maybe, kind of.
Because I just want to make sure we have enough time, because I want to hear from everybody here.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, we'll have.
Okay. I'm going to pass on this one because I'm going to save the time for all you folks.
So it's a very, very good question. What I would say is that shadow work is tricky because it's subtle, and sometimes people are not aware of their shadows, and so they need a mirror. If you don't have enough self-awareness yet to even know what your shadow is, or what to do, it's always good to start with somebody who is really loving, supportive, but also with integrity and discernment, so that you can be guided. And then if you feel like you want to do it alone, at least you will know where to start. But I recommend at the beginning having somebody who can really reflect to you, because it's not easy.
Ideally, someone who's not also working with their own trauma, where you're bouncing off of each other, right?
Well, at the same time.
So here's the thing: is that when you've worked long enough, you know that you attract your people. Like, my medicine is love, so I will attract people who, like, you cannot teach somebody something you don't know. You cannot take someone where you have never been before. So you actually want somebody who has done their work so that they can get you there. And if you ever have somebody who's bouncing off their trauma, I don't know how you said it, run away. Like, what's that about?
You know, I mean, there's this of like, I've been trying to do my own self-work on my own for a long time, you know, and so the idea is, okay, well, I just came to this panel, you know, cool, can I continue to try to tackle my shadow? So in that sense,
I just think that it takes a long time to do it on your own, and you don't have to. Like,
and to me, there's a reason that we've been trained in groups so much, at least from where I come from. Other people reflect back to you, and you need the reflection often to see your shadow. And there's one thing I want to say about plant medicine, because someone reminded me of that today and said, I need to say it. And that's, you need to really work with someone who's experienced, who knows what they're doing. You need to work with someone who knows what they're doing with plant medicine, because it isn't safe for some people to go there, to use that. It's safe with certain kinds of personalities, but there are some people, because I've had someone come to me and she was going to use something with someone else, a yoga teacher, and I looked at her and I said, you may not come back from it, because I could feel where she was at. And that's important to know. Someone needs to know when it's wise and when it's not. And it's very hard to see your shadow and work it through on your own. You can do the beginning steps, but no one wants to go into that icky territory by themselves and really get to it. It's difficult. It takes a long time, honey.
do you guys have any closing statements before we go to Q&A?
Or do we do that after this? No, we can just close now and...
We can just,
So I'll say thank you, everyone. Tony, Shireen, Marie, Helaine. See, I told you we don't really know each other.
Well, my name is
Marisa, Ash, everybody who made this happen, Leah, and thank all of you, right?
Yes.
We'd be here talking to some walls if you weren't here. So thank you for showing up, and thank you to the spirits that bring us together in community and these medicines that are bringing us to this place of the edge of our expansion and transformation and awareness. And I feel so privileged, really, to be in this place of this new understanding of what medicine means in the 21st century. And this is part of it. So thank you all for continuing to do this work and for showing up for each other.
Thank you, Ashley, Marisa, Tony, Sheree, everybody. You. I'm really honored and privileged to know these two women. And our moderator, thank you so much for having such provocative, transformative questions so that we could really go deep and share our own experiences. And I just want to honor each and every one of you who have come here today. It means that you care about you and humanity. and the planet. So thank you.
And I especially want to thank our musicians. I never heard you guys before, and you are incredible. Of course, I felt I was journeying listening to you, so it got me in the right mood. And thank you. I haven't met you before, but I'm grateful to be part of this, and of course, you I know, and I am grateful for you. And thank you. It's so wonderful to me to see so many people coming to something about the shadow. Blessings to all of you, and love. Okay. Questions?
I just want to say that I think this journey is the coolest journey we could ever be on. This journey of remembering we're whole, of healing. I'm just really into making this an adventure that we're proud of, that we're not afraid to talk to our coworkers or families about, because really the more we talk about this, the more we are open and unafraid, the more we make it okay for everyone else to, the more we can point out different modalities we've worked with and help each other, and just help consciousness wake up a little more and more and more, and get things on a better track. They're on a good track. We're getting there. All right, so thank you, everyone. Do we have any questions in the audience?
Okay, I'm gonna try this one more time since we're gonna be far away from the microphone. So, okay.
And if people have a particular person they want to ask a question, speak.
If there's any person you want to specifically ask, you can say their name or point or something.
Hi, thank you, for everyone. My question is, you talked about when you see something that that annoys you or whatever, that's usually your shadow. There's this quote I want to read you, it's part of the question. It says that before you diagnose yourself with depression or loss of esteem, first make sure you are not in fact surrounded by assholes. So my question is, when is it that is your own shadow truly, and when is it that somebody else is actually truly being an asshole? Where's that boundary? Yeah.
Well, I think you may have said something, Marie, about it, and it's if only one person says you're doing X, Y, Z, okay, you're whatever, you may be able to ignore it. They may see everyone that way. They may have dark-colored glasses for that aspect. If 2 or 3 or 4 people start telling you the same thing, you need to pay attention. You need to just, get the saddle.
And just a little note, even if you are deciding that that person is an a-hole, right? If that's your decision, our shadow, we can still do the shadow work. Why was I with that person? What did I do? And how am I 100% responsible for my existence? So I hear what you're saying, but there's always an opportunity. There's always an opportunity for us to look at ourselves and to not just focus out there.
Yeah. All right, there's a question back here.
Hi, Helaine. Is that working?
Oh, hold on.
You can't hear.
Helaine? Hi. I hope I can phrase this right. You talked about plant medicine perhaps not being appropriate for a certain person.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a more subtle version of that where a person at one point in the process, it might be appropriate for them to engage in plant medicine, at another point of their process, and then not appropriate?
Oh, the time when it's appropriate and when it's not.
For the same person, yes.
Okay. Well, that might be the case. It could be when we begin doing some work with them, they don't have enough of a sense of self, and it could be dangerous at that point to do plant medicine. And if we've done some of the beginning work so they have a sense of who they are, so they have some foundation inside, some sense of being, then it may be safer later. It doesn't mean if they're not safe now that they may never be. It depends on the person and their energy system, to me.
Test. Okay.
I'll just sit and ask. To someone sort of uninitiated to this, I kind of get an idea what the shadow is, but I guess my question is a bit more specific. So with plant medicine, are you is that what it's about? Is like confronting the shadow? Does that happen like day one, or is this like 12 steps? Like that's like step 9. You know what I mean? Like when, like what specifically are you just fighting your shadow, and how does that manifest? Like I wanted a little more specifics.
There's no rules.
I know we love, but my question in the process is
we got the memo.
Is how, you know, how does that manifest, I guess, very specifically, like, you know, I guess.
From my perspective, it varies person to person, modality to modality. There's no rule book, particularly if we're talking about shamanic work or plant medicine work or ceremonial work. It's not like, okay, now I'm on chapter 3, subsection 4, and it's going to tell me to do X, Y, and Z. It's very dynamic. So what shows up at the beginning part of any journey, whether it's with plant medicine or any other kind of therapeutic process, will be informed by what happened the last time, say, we were in a session. So it's like life, right? Like what happens today is in large measure informed by everything that's happened since the moment we were born.
I have a feeling that his question was, what exactly did you want to know?
I meet you. I take plant medicine, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Is is the devil gonna stab me? Like I don't, you know, like I just, and when, I guess, is the question. And I know that it doesn't work that way, but my mind does. So I'm just trying to figure it out a little bit, because I'm new and I don't.
Thank you so much for really stating that. You know, I love the part about is the devil gonna stab me, and no, it's great. I think, you know, we should express whatever we feel, and so the first thing is that your shadow is a part of you. It's not something out there that will come and get you, right? So that's the first part. So it's not the devil, it's not outside. And when you take plant medicine, hopefully you would have done a little bit of work before you take plant medicine and have an intention. Some people can go straight into that. Some people can have a blissful journey about being a butterfly. I mean, you don't know, right? But if your intention is that you really want to integrate your shadow, then that's the intention, and you can do different things about it. Make sense?
Yeah.
And you might experience your shadow as the devil coming to get you, and it could be the most horrifying experience of your life. Or you could take plant medicine and see the devil and say, let me get a closer look, and then the devil turns into an angel and you have a night of pure bliss and ecstasy. We don't know.
And in fact, if you do see the devil, it's often that way. The devil is us.
Ourselves.
Okay, yeah, I got a question. Thanks, guys, for doing this talk. And I think you guys explained very well what the shadow is. So I think, at least I have a feeling of what it is. So. So yeah, I can yell if I want, but I think that I might speak for myself here, probably others too. You know, we have the shadow.
So why don't you come up here and speak in this mic? Oh.
So we know what the shadow is, and so we might be sitting here and we're like, okay, I don't want to have to deal with this. This is going to seem like a lot of work. What kind of it's might not. So, you know, what kind of words of courage or motivation do you have for us to kind of start the journey and decide to do it? Because we might not want to decide to do it because it's too scary. We think we might get hurt or something. It might be dangerous.
Well, because the rewards are so phenomenal. It takes you to a place of deeper love. It takes you to a place of deeper passion. It takes you to a place for some of hotter sex. It takes you to a place of better relationships. You get turned on to life more. Your business and career opens up and you didn't even expect it to, or you change it totally. The rewards are incredible. That's why.
You're free. You're free. And I think that I really want to repeat, and I've said it so many times, it is not frightful. It is not, what is the word you use, like we're so afraid, or there is nothing to be afraid of. It is a part of you. It is a part of you. It's just something that you develop to survive, to even feel like you can exist, or to get away from whatever trauma, right? So there's no fear here. I know that in the collective, people feel like the shadow is this devil, or I'm not really sure, but I think during all this time we've been trying to convey that when we accept that it's just a mechanism, it's a process, it's a coping, it's a journey that you can take to just explore, and you know, like Sita said, you can just open the lid a little bit. You don't have to like rip it off, right?
And thank you so much on that. And I want to say that while cosmically, ultimately, there might not be anything to be afraid of, and it's all us, we're afraid. I've been afraid a lot of times. And that fear is it's real, right, when we're feeling it. So to say, wow, I'm afraid. I want all the things that Helaine has talked about, and I'm afraid. So the first step is just acknowledging and being honest, and you get to decide, right? Like, oh, I want that, and here's one way that I may get to be that way. Because, you know, in a sense, like, she talked about some things that we might have, but really it's a state of being. So do we want to choose to continue to stay where we are, and that's fine, or do we want to be some other way? And in the middle of that is all the fear and the trepidation and the angst and the worry about, like, do I really want to do this? What if it takes 5 years? And so we don't do it in 5-year blocks. We do it a minute at a time, a little crack at a time. And hopefully we call in, and if we're doing it, we are typically calling in the people who are like also doing that, and the people that are going to support us on our journey.
And so, you know, one thing, I don't even know where this came from, but one thing that always sticks in my head is when, you know, as we're growing up, oftentimes at some young formative age, something somewhat traumatic might happen to us, and we create a belief, and that belief is often the shadow, and that choice and that decision you made as a 5-year-old is what's going to inform you for the rest of your life. So you're a 40-year-old living off of the decision a 5-year-old made that you are unlovable. Right. Or whatever it is, you know? So it's like, it's if you have the capacity to expend a little energy to really fully live life and, you know, upgrade your system so that it's the 40-year-old consciously making the decision instead of the 5-year-old operating subconsciously, you know, that's one way to look at it. So that's a good one. Yeah,
it is very good. And I really love what Sita said. You deal with it a little at a time. You need to feel safe. So if you're fearful, we deal with the fear first.
Exactly.
So that's what we do then. Baby steps. Baby steps.
We have time for one more quick question. Oh my, there's so many. Ash, you make the choice. I can't decide. We got one right up here. Yeah.
Yeah. You're closer to the mic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You guys are so beautiful. It's Oh my God, incredible. I think it takes a lot for us to even want to discuss the shadow. I think we're all here really, really brave for even talking about this, because in our society, that's the last thing we want to do. We'll take pills, we'll take drugs, we'll do anything we possibly can to avoid this topic. So the fact that we're all here, like, yay. However, once we leave this room, there's a whole world out there of people that chose not to come here. What is your advice? How do we, who are brave enough to walk into this door, how do we deal with people who aren't? And we can't just walk away and cut certain relationships. Certain we can, some we can, but then there are so many that we can't. So how do we function dealing with other people's shadows and horrible behavior that manifests because of those shadows, and yet we have no choice, but we have to deal with them, such as a boss, for example. Oh God, yeah. The name of my boss his name is Boss Hole. So, like, for that, in my mind, yes. So, like, but there's certain times where we can't walk away. So,
yes.
I would love to hear what.
I know what I've done. There was someone I worked with who was a scientist actually with one of the makeup companies, and her boss was horrible to her for like a year, 2 years, a long, long time. So I showed her a spiritual process. I work a lot spiritually, and I work a lot in training my people with guides and love and angels and whatever will work for them, or animals, I don't care which it works for, but whatever. And I had her do a practice before she went into work every single day of going to her heart, sending him loving energy before she entered her job. Now, she really hated him, and I understood that, so I said, you want to turn it around? Try this. Within 2 weeks, her boss totally changed towards her, and she was in shock. Mm-hmm. That's what I train them with. I do a multi-dimensional healing group a couple times a month, a little group. I think I put the flyers somewhere up there. Because a lot of people aren't ready to do plant medicine. It takes time. And I get to decide who's right for it and who isn't for me, mm-hmm. right? Each of you have to decide. Mm-hmm. So you start with baby steps. And if you can't stand someone, there are ways to work it spiritually.
That's a great answer. One thing that, because it's your boss, we are only responsible for ourselves. You can actually not change anyone. And so I love what Helaine said. And one of the things I do personally before I leave my bed is I put myself in an eggshell of golden energy, of love or joy, whatever I'm calling in. So as I'm walking in, that's the energy that's like permeating. Because if anybody knows physics or electromagnetics or whatever, the vibration that is the highest will entrain everything else. So if his anger is stronger than your joy or your peace, of course you're going to end up angry. And you don't have to smile or show it externally, but decide how you want to feel and radiate that. And also a very strong practice is forgiveness. Like, forgive him every day. Forgive him, forgive yourself for putting yourself in a job that puts you in that situation. So him and you. So you see yourself sitting, I forgive you, and him. Powerful.
And thank you. And along those lines, I'm going to extend an invitation. And if you choose to accept the invitation, you could start now, or you could say, let me give this a moment. And the invitation is for a period of 24 hours, every person that you see, to look into their eyes and say, wow, I love you. Just for 24 hours. And it sounds pretty simple, and it's actually not that easy to do. And they have to.
It's hard.
I tell the people I love them, like with my eyes, right? So look in their eyes, and they may not look back, but there's something about that, and it's this vibration that we start to hold, and then we start to say, wow. Every time I see my boss, who I don't like, but I love, I'm saying, oh, I love you. Because we can have preferences. I like you, I don't like you. But love is a different department. And so doing this practice will reveal a lot, and I've done it, and I've done it on a number of different occasions. What really happens is it tells me so much about myself, exactly, right? And my judgment, and why I think this person is a jerk, and how they've hurt me, and how they're making my life miserable. And all that can be true, but if I can come from this place of, wow, I love you. Like, and what happens when I do that practice? So there's no answer, but it's something you might want to try, just for 24 hours.
All right, and with that, if we can give a round of applause for our lovely panelists. And to you guys for being so awesome and vulnerable and dealing with our microphone situation. And Ash probably has a bunch of stuff to say. Take it away.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys. Thank you, Marisa, for bringing all these wonderful, amazing women here. Such a great panel. Thank you so much. And those good questions and everything. So I want to talk a little bit about upcoming events. Tony, do you want to talk about what we're... Oh, okay, well... I'll talk about our next event then, and then he can hopefully talk about that one. So in early May, so my other hat, I wear many hats in this world. I, along with some colleagues, have started a clinic in North Hollywood called the California Center for Psychedelic Therapy. It's very exciting. We are doing ketamine assisted psychotherapy there. And so my boss, who's a psychiatrist, and one of our clinicians are going to be coming and talking about ketamine for depression and what ketamine assisted psychotherapy is. So ketamine, if you don't know, is a Schedule 3 substance, which it's actually a very safe anesthetic, but it's also been shown to be very effective for people that have treatment-resistant depression, both bipolar and unipolar depression. So, and it's legal. We can do this right now. And so my boss has developed this practice, and we are bringing it out further at this point. So it's very exciting. The same group of people are also doing... we're also part of MAPS, and we're doing the MDMA assisted psychotherapy for the treatment of PTSD clinical trial here in LA. So as soon as MDMA comes online, we will also be adding that to our practice as well. So it's a very exciting time, and we're feeling very blessed to be on this path together, and they're an amazing group of people.